The lethality of their power is greater than ever. Their capacity to impose control over the politically awakened masses of the world is at a historical low. In earlier times, it was easier to control 1 million people than physically to kill 1 million people. Today, it is infinitely easier to kill 1 million people than to control 1 million people.
I talk about the Federal Reserve a lot, and I've done extensive research on the foundations, the deception, and the operation of the Federal Reserve Crime Syndicate. So this is a report cataloging the 8 families of the Federal Reserve Cartel. The 4 horsemen of banking, Bank of America, J.P. Morgan Chase, Citigroup, and Wells Fargo, own the 4 horsemen of oil, ExxonMobil, Royal Dutch Shell, BP Amoco, and Chevron Texaco, in tandem with Deutsche Bank, BNP, Barclays, and other European old money behemoths. But their monopoly over the global economy does not end at the edge of the oil patch. According to company 10-K filings to the SEC, the 4 horsemen of banking are among the top 10 stockholders of virtually every Fortune 500 corporation. So, who are then the stockholders in these money center banks? This information is guarded much more closely. Queries to bank regulatory agencies regarding stock ownership in the top 25 U.S. bank holding companies were given Freedom of Information Act status before being denied on national security grounds. This is rather ironic since many of the bank's stockholders reside in Europe. Starting to get clearer, the picture of what's going on here? It is a tremendous deception. One important repository for the wealth of the global oligarchy that owns these banks, holding companies, is U.S. Trust Corporation, founded in 1853 and now owned by Bank of America. A recent U.S. Trust corporate director and honorary trustee was Walter Rothschild. Other directors included Daniel Davison of J.P. Morgan Chase, Richard Tucker of ExxonMobil, Daniel Roberts of Citigroup, and Marshall Schwartz of Morgan Stanley. J.W. McAllister, an oil industry insider with the House of Saud connections, wrote in The Grim Reaper that information he acquired from Saudi bankers cited 80% ownership of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, by far the most powerful federal branch, by just 8 families, 4 of which reside in the U.S. They are the Goldman Sachs, Rockefellers, Lehmans, and Kuhn Loebs of New York, the Rothschilds of Paris and London, the Warburgs of Hamburg, the Lazards of Paris, and the Israel Moses Seifs of Rome. CPA Thomas D. Schauf corroborates McAllister's claims, adding that 10 banks control all 12 Federal Reserve branches. He names N.M. Rothschild of London, Rothschild Bank of Berlin, Warburg Bank of Hamburg, Warburg Bank of Amsterdam, Lehman Brothers of New York, Lazard Brothers of Paris, Kuhn Loeb Bank of New York, Israel Moses Seif Bank of Italy, Goldman Sachs of New York, and J.P. Morgan Chase Bank of New York. Schauf lists William Rockefeller, Paul Warburg, Jacob Schiff, and James Stillman as individuals who own large shares of the Fed. The Schiffs are insiders at Kuhn Loeb. The Stillmans are Citigroup insiders who married into the Rockefeller clan at the turn of the century. Last century, that is, 1900. In his book, The Secrets of the Federal Reserve, Eustace Mullins exposed the chart connecting the Federal Reserve and its members to the families of the Rothschild, Warburg, and Rockefeller families and others. The control that these banking families exert over the global economy cannot be overstated and is quite intentionally shrouded in secrecy. Their corporate media arm is quick to discredit any information exposing this private central banking cartel as conspiracy theory. Yeah, it's a fact. And these facts do remain. The House of Morgan. The Federal Reserve Bank was born in 1913, the same year the U.S. banking scion J.P. Morgan died, and the Rockefeller Foundation was formed. The House of Morgan presided over American finance from the corner of Wall Street and Broad, acting as quasi-U.S. central bank since 1838, when George Peabody founded it in London. Peabody was a business associate of the Rothschilds. By 1890, the House of Morgan was lending to Europe's central bank, financing Russian railroads, floating Brazilian provincial government bonds, and funding Argentine public works projects. A recession in 1893 enhanced Morgan's power. That year, Morgan saved the U.S. government from a bank panic, forming a syndicate to prop up government reserves with a shipment of $62 million worth of Rothschild gold. Morgan was the driving force behind Western expansion in the United States, financing and controlling westbound railroads through voting trusts. In 1879, Cornelius Vanderbilt's Morgan-financed New York Central Railroad gave preferential shipping rates to John D. Rockefeller's budding Standard Oil monopoly, cementing the Rockefeller-Morgan relationship. The House of Morgan now fell under Rothschild and the Rockefeller family control. A New York Herald headline read, "Railroad Kings Form Gigantic Trust." In 1903, Bankers Trust was set up by the eight families. Benjamin Strong of Bankers Trust was the first governor of the New York Federal Reserve Bank. In 1913, creation of the Fed fused the power of the eight families to the military and diplomatic might of the U.S. government. If their overseas loans went unpaid, the oligarchs could now deploy U.S. Marines to collect the debts. Morgan Chase and Citibank formed an interlocking international lending syndicate. Public distrust of the combine spread. Many considered them traitors working for European old money. Pretty much on the level there. That's what it was, what it is to this day. Rockefeller's Standard Oil, Andrew Carnegie's U.S. Steel, and Edward Harriman's railroads were all financed by banker Jacob Schiff at Kuhn Loeb, who worked closely with the European Rothschilds. Several Western states banned the bankers. Populist preacher William Jennings Bryan was thrice Democratic nominee for president from 1896 to 1908. The central theme of his anti-imperialist campaign was that America was falling into the trap of financial servitude to British capital. And we have fallen prey and are under this false sense that American money is American money and that our interests lie with the American people. Our interests lie with the British Empire and their agenda. That is true through the Royal Institute of International Affairs, which orchestrates the American State Department through the Council on Foreign Relations in New York. It's just a fact. The IMF and the World Bank were central to this new world order. In 1944, the first World Bank bonds were floated by Morgan Stanley and First Boston. The French Lazard family became more involved in the House of Morgan's interests. Lazard Frères, France's biggest investment bank, is owned by the Lazard and David Weil families. Old Genoese banking science represented by Michel Daviv. A recent chairman and CEO of Citigroup was Stanford Weil. In 1968, Morgan Guaranty launched Euroclear, a Brussels-based bank clearing system for Eurodollar securities. It was the first such automated endeavor. It took to calling Euroclear the Beast. Brussels serves as headquarters for the new European Central Bank and for NATO. In 1973, Morgan officials met secretly in Bermuda to illegally resurrect the old House of Morgan, 20 years before Glass-Steagall was repealed. Morgan and the Rockefellers provided the financial backing for Merrill Lynch, boosting it to the Big Five of U.S. investment banking. Merrill is now part of Bank of America. John D. Rockefeller used his oil wealth to acquire Equitable Trust, which had gobbled up several large banks and corporations by the 1920s. The Great Depression had helped consolidate Rockefeller's power. His Chase Bank merged with Kuhn Loeb's Manhattan Bank to form Chase Manhattan, cementing a long-time family relationship. The Kuhn Loeb had financed, along with the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds, quest to become king of the oil patch. National City Bank of Cleveland provided John D. with the money he needed to embark upon his monopolization of the U.S. oil industry. The bank was identified in congressional hearings as being one of three Rothschild-owned banks in the U.S. during the 1870s when Rockefeller first incorporated Standard Oil of Ohio. One Rockefeller Standard Oil partner was Edward Harkness, whose family came to control Chemical Bank. Another was James Stillman, whose family controlled manufacturers Hanover Trust. Both banks merged under the J.P. Morgan umbrella. Two of the Stillman daughters married two of William Rockefeller's sons. The two families control a big chunk of Citigroup as well. In the insurance business, the Rockefellers control Metropolitan Life, Equitable Life, Prudential, and New York Life. Rockefeller banks control 25% of assets in the largest 50 banks the largest 50 commercial banks, and 30% of all assets of the 50 largest insurance companies. Insurance companies, the first in the U.S., were launched by Freemasons through their Woodmen of America, play a key role in the Bermuda drug money shuffle. Interesting. Companies under the Rockefeller control include ExxonMobil, Chevron, Texaco, BP, Amoco, Marathon Oil, Freeport-McMoRan, Quaker Oats, Azarco, United, Delta, Northwest, ITT, International Harvester, Xerox, Boeing, Westinghouse, Hewlett-Packard, Honeywell, International Paper, Pfizer, Motorola, Monsanto, Union Carbide, and General Foods. The family owns 30 Rockefeller Plaza, where the National Christmas Tree is lighted every year, and Rockefeller Center. David Rockefeller was instrumental in the construction of the World Trade Centers. The Dulles and Rockefeller families are cousins. That's right, Dulles Airport. Allen Dulles created the CIA, assisted the Nazis, covered up the Kennedy hit from the Warren Commission, and struck a deal with the Muslim Brotherhood to create mind-controlled assassins. You can't make this stuff up. It's true. That's what you get here, Truth Talk News. Brother John Foster Dulles presided over the phony Goldman Sachs Trust before the 1929 stock market crash and helped his brother overthrow governments in Iran and Guatemala. Both were Skull and Bones, Council on Foreign Relations insiders, and 33rd degree Masons. The Rockefellers were instrumental in forming the depopulation-oriented Club of Rome at their family estate in Bellagio, Italy. Their Pocantico Hills estate gave birth to the Trilateral Commission. The family is a major funder of the eugenics movement, which spawned Hitler, human cloning, and the current DNA obsession in the United States scientific circles. Anyway, the Rockefeller Foundation has close financial ties to both Ford and Carnegie Foundations. Other family philanthropic endeavors include the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, Rockefeller Institute for Medical Research, General Education Board, Rockefeller University, and the University of Chicago, where our good old friend Barack Hussein Obama hails from, which churns out a steady stream of far-right economics as apologists for international capital, including Milton Friedman. John D. Rockefeller headed the Population Council until his death. His namesake son is a senator from West Virginia. Jay Rockefeller says the internet should be banned. It was a bad thing, because we can't control things. We can't keep our lives secret. Okay. Brother Winthrop Rockefeller was lieutenant governor of Arkansas. He basically controlled the Rockefeller power, still controls that state to this day, the rise of Clinton. In an October 1975 interview with Playboy magazine, Vice President Nelson Rockefeller, who was also governor of New York, articulated his family's patronizing worldview. I am a great believer in planning. Economic, social, political, military, total world planning. And you bet he is. Thank God he died soon after that. But the family legacy and their mission continues. These people believe. This is their breed. This is how they believe. Too many people in the world. We need to do something about the population. We must control everything, all aspects of human life, because we know better, and we will take care of you. And we're good, loving people, God-fearing people. They believe it. These evil Luciferian scum. Nixon asked Nelson Rockefeller to become his Secretary of Treasury, but Rockefeller declined the job, knowing his power was much greater at the helm of the chase. Author Gary Allen writes in the Rockefeller File that in 1973, David Rockefeller met with 27 heads of state, including the rulers of Russia and Red China. Of course, part of this whole thing is to bring communism. And understanding what's going on in America today with a radically socialist, communist president, Obama, hiding the fact that he's a communist. Oh, you're crazy to call me a communist. Oh, it's racist. But everything they're doing is following the Communist Manifesto to the T. Following the 1975 Nugan Handbank CIA coup against Australian Prime Minister Gough Whitlam, his British Crown appointed successor, Malcolm Fraser, sped to the U.S., where he met with President Gerald Ford after conferring with David Rockefeller. Again, they're calling the shots, ladies and gentlemen. This is the New World Order. We must end the Federal Reserve Prime Syndicate, go back to constitutional money, and take back our country from these criminals who have hijacked it. Thank you for watching Truth Talk News. I'm Howard Nima.